Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We are coming to you from the oh-so-beautiful neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very honored and so wicked happy that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in that mission by telling all of your family and friends, your kids' teachers, their principal, the librarian, their youth minister, your neighbors, all about the show, and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM FM 24/7 radio network, and they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, Audible, CastBox, Player FM, Boomplay, Ghana, wherever you find your favorite shows. Two wonderful guests for you today. First up, Margot Bisnow will be here to celebrate raising an entrepreneur. And later in the show, we meet the very enthusiastic Millie Florence. She is here to celebrate her new middle grade fairy tale fantasy. It's called Beyond Mulberry Glen. Hey, my friends, we are really excited. Reading with Your Kids podcast is returning to the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, November 9th and 10th at the Stevens Convention Center in Rosemont, Illinois. Let your imagination come to life at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, the ultimate family play experience. Dive into hands-on fun with the hottest new toys and games, meet the inventors behind your favorite products, and even get a sneak peek at what will top holiday wish list this year. From interactive play zones to exciting competitions and exclusive giveaways, there's something for every member of the family at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair. And don't miss the Young Inventor Challenge, where kids showcase their creativity and innovation. Who knows, you just might meet the next big inventor. Join us at the Donald E. Stevens Convention Center in Rosemont, Illinois, November 9th and 10th. Whether you're a game enthusiast or just looking for a fun weekend with the family, the Chicago Toy and Game Fair has it all. And like I said, the Reading with Your Kids podcast will be there, and you may have a chance to be heard on the show. Get your tickets today and bring the magic of play to life. Visit shytag.com for details, and be sure to use the discount code READ, R-E-A-D, at checkout to save on tickets. Join us right now from Powder Mountain in the wonderful state of Utah. Our guest is here today to celebrate. Her new book is called Raising Entrepreneurs. Let children figure things out for themselves. Please welcome to the show, Margot Bisnow. Margot, how are you?
I'm great. That's actually what my book is about, but the title is Raising an Entrepreneur.
Raising an Entrepreneur. I am sorry, I wrote this down wrong. Raising an. No, actually, this was intentional. That way we say the title correctly a few times. And see, that's what a smart entrepreneur. Oof, okay. Raising an entrepreneur. Let children figure things out by themselves. Let's just start with what does it take to raise an entrepreneur?
So you can't actually try to raise an entrepreneur. You can't make a kid an entrepreneur any more than you can make them an orchestra conductor. Mm-hmm. What you can do is give them the traits, the skills, the characteristics, the personality that if they choose to go into that line of work, they will be able to. In other words, so for me, an entrepreneur is anyone who starts anything. It's not just someone with a for-profit business. You're an entrepreneur. My son who has a band is an entrepreneur. So it's anyone who starts anything. And, you know, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to be curious. You have to be resilient. You have to be unafraid to take risks. I mean, there's all these different characteristics that you have to have. If you have those characteristics, you might not become an entrepreneur. You might become more entrepreneurial and just be better at any job that you end up doing. So you can't actually try to raise an entrepreneur, but you can raise entrepreneurial children who, whether they become entrepreneurs or not, I think will be happier and more successful.
Well, the first time somebody called me an entrepreneur, I thought they were crazy, but that was like 35 years ago, and I've come to really appreciate it, and am very encouraging to both of my kids to kind of think entrepreneurial. And I agree with you. Not only does it help if you are starting something, but I think it makes you a better employee because you're thinking more and thinking instead of just, I get this one thing I have to do over and over and over again. You're thinking bigger picture, I think.
Right. You're thinking of new ways to solve problems. You're thinking outside the box. You're willing to take on a project if you think it's worth it, even if other people tell you you're crazy. You're willing to do all sorts of things. So part of it is everyone, I think, will be better off if they are more entrepreneurial. But the other sort of half answer to your question is, 30 years ago, people just didn't become entrepreneurs the way they are today. And today, the most recent statistics I've seen is that half of all young people say they'd like to become an entrepreneur. And I think it's really important for parents to keep open the possibility that that may be what their child wants to do. And what that means is not sending an uncurious kid to entrepreneur camp for 2 weeks. What that means is fostering the skills necessary so that if they do choose that, they'll be ready to go. And basically what that means is that the parents have to support their child's passion. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that takes a big gulp. You want to do what?
Boy, did I hear that.
But I think it's really important for parents, and I'd love to go into that more if you're curious.
Absolutely, yeah. No, when I became an entrepreneur, unknowingly, I made the announcement to my family and friends that I was leaving human services and social work, and I was going to become a professional clown. So we got a lot of big gulps and a lot of other very unsupportive comments.
How old were you when you did this? Like in your 20s?
I was 26, 20.
And how long were you a clown?
35 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it took me a while to figure out how to do it and how to make a living at it. But I did, and a big reason I was able to do it is because my beautiful wife was very supportive of me going for my dream. We really became a team and did it together. She was a teacher for 34 years and was like, hey, this is the time. We just got married and we have a home, but if you're going to take a chance, now is the time to take the chance. And so we went with it, and we just celebrated 34 years of marriage yesterday.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. So, I did it for 35 years full time. Still performing occasionally now, but it was made me incredibly happy.
And honestly, isn't that the end game? I mean,
Agreed. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how we can raise curious kids who aren't afraid to get up one day and say, I want to be a drummer in a band, or I want to be a clown.
Every person that I interviewed who became an entrepreneur had a passion growing up outside of school. And in every case, someone in their family, usually their mom, but someone in their family, and occasionally someone outside of their family, but in every case, somebody close to them supported that passion and told them how proud they were of their success in that passion. And, half of them were great students and half of them weren't. Half of them were always unhappy in school. Half of them sort of were okay in school, but ended up dropping out to work on their project full time. But whether they were great students or not, and whether their parents were, very educated or not, had nothing to do with the parents becoming super proud of their kids' success in the thing the kids loved. And because the kids had chosen something they loved, they were working at it really, really hard. And because they were working really, really hard, they developed grit. They developed focus, perseverance, the trade-off between hard work and results. They developed resilience. They learned about failure. They learned not to be discouraged by failure. They learned how to pivot when things weren't working. They learned all these skills that later on, when they, grew up, helped them in their chosen profession. Some of them, the artists, were, found it young and it became their profession. But for the ones who weren't artists, none of them basically is doing what their passion was when they were young. But they all developed those skills. About half of them, their passion was sports. But it doesn't matter what your passion is. It can be sports, it can be chess, it can be cooking, it can be dancing, it can be writing poetry. It can be anything you want, just so long as you're passionate about something that you're working at really, really, really hard. Yeah. And getting confident because you're getting really good.
Yeah. How can we, now I raised two wonderful kids who are now amazing adults, and they were very different. My daughter discovered a passion for dance at 3 years old and just worked so hard and developed all those kind of skills that you were talking about, the grit and the resiliency, and worked real hard at it. And she would, go to class. And I remember the first time that her teacher called me in. She was only 4, maybe 5 years old, and each dance would take a turn, going across the dance floor, trying the new step that they had just learned. But the dance teacher pointed out to me that while all the other girls would get to the other side of the room and stand around and watch, my daughter would go to the side of the room and continue to practice the dance step. And that's something that really carried her and pushed her through till she was 18 and 19 years old. And my son, on the other hand, who's very successful now, but he didn't have that passion. And it was tough for him. His childhood was a lot tougher for him than it was for my daughter. My daughter worked really hard, but she was usually finding things that made her happy. And my son was, he was much more frustrated in his life.
Yeah. No, it's harder if you don't have something that you love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What kind of things can we do to, for example, my son, we have a kid and he's a good kid and he's doing okay in school, but he just hasn't found that thing that sparks, excitement in his life. Do we suggest things? Do we push, or do we just let them kind of find it on their own?
I mean, I think we have to be a little proactive. I signed my kids up for every conceivable thing and you see what sticks. And I always said, if I paid for it, you have to finish out the season. Mm-hmm. But if you hate it after that, you never have to do it again. Mm-hmm. 'Cause you just don't know what's going to click. I mean, my older son, he did every sport and he was about 12 and he discovered tennis. And I mean, my husband and I don't play tennis. And I mean, within 2 years, it was 5 hours a day, 7 days a week. And, I mean, we'd be like the only parents at these, tournaments for the top 100 kids in the country who didn't know the rules. Like we just didn't know tennis. So it can't just be something but right. If your kid actually like, hey, I think I want to keep going at this. Yeah, sure. You pay for the lessons, you send them to the camp, you whatever. And I don't know. I just think it's hard, but if they show any interest in something, then you just support it and, see how you can augment it.
Yeah. Now, as you're saying, you interviewed over 70 entrepreneurs for this. What was the most surprising thing that you heard from these entrepreneurs?
So I sort of alluded to this earlier, but every one of them had someone who believed in them. And when I go around and I talk to different parents and I say this, they're like, come on, Margot, every parent believes in their kid. And I'm like, no, every parent loves their kid. Every parent wants their child to be successful and happy. But, most parents with a child like my younger son say things like, well, of course you can take music lessons in high school, but in college you have to major in something useful. Mm-hmm. So what does that tell your child? That tells your child you don't really believe that if they pursue their passion, they can make a living.
Right, right.
And so I think it's just so important for parents. Actually, you want to do that? You want to be a clown? You want to dance? You want to write music? Like, okay, yeah, go for it. And we know if you put your mind to it, you can be successful if you work hard enough. And we're here for you with the setbacks. You can always come home if it doesn't work out. Life isn't smooth. We're here. Your family supports you. We're here for you if you have failures, but we know eventually you're going to figure it out and you're going to be great. And every parent said that.
And I guess, as we're hearing about our kids say, oh, yeah, I want to be a musician, I want to be a dancer, saying something like, okay, but you got to have something to fall back on. It's probably not the most helpful thing to say.
Well, it's a little, as somebody said to me, if the people closest to you don't believe in you, then what does that say to you?
Mm-hmm. What do you say to the person who's listening out there who's saying, yeah, Margot, fine, gently somehow figured out how to make a living doing this clowning stuff, and your kid's in the band, and that's great, but that's, like one in a million, be realistic, it's a tough world out there, and somebody has to prepare my kid for that.
It is a tough world. So is your solution, sir, that your kid's just gonna, end up in a job that they're miserable in? You think that's a better answer? Mm-hmm. Gosh. No, it's hard. And do you know how many people have just been fired in the last year from their high-paying tech jobs? Like, there ain't no, guarantees in life, no matter what you're doing anymore today. Mm-hmm. And this is actually the second edition of my book, because between the time I first interviewed these people and, 5 years later, half of them were doing something else. Their company failed, or they sold it, or they merged it, or they left it, or something. I mean, it's not a smooth path for anybody, but that doesn't mean your child shouldn't do something that has a chance of giving them joy. Yeah. And every one of the people in my book said to me, my parents always told me, if you love what you're doing, you're never going to work a day in your life. And every one of them told me I work harder than anybody else, mm-hmm. because I love what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And no, maybe they won't be successful, and maybe they'll pivot, and maybe they'll just say, I've gotten really, really knowledgeable about this one area that I've been trying to make it in. And I don't think I'm going to make it in that area, but I see this window, this thing that it's nearby, and it could be done better. It could be done differently. I think I could try to make that work. Mm-hmm. Once you get to know something, you can see what's missing, or what's broken, or what could be added to, or what could be changed. And you can try that. I mean, there's no guarantees, but at least, gosh, give them a chance of happiness.
Yeah. You're preaching to the choir here, and the other thing, the world, the job world has really changed. One of the things that I heard, when I made my choice known was, well, that's really great, but get something, get a regular job, do that stuff in the weekend, do that passionate stuff on the weekend, but get a job and like at the phone company or with the government, and you work there for 30 or 40 years because you're never going to get laid off, and that world doesn't exist anymore.
Right. A, it doesn't exist, and B, to the extent it does, why be miserable?
Right. Yes.
Why choose a life of being unhappy? Like, I don't get it.
Well, I think it's fear.
Yeah, of course it is.
It really is. You've somebody, I was reading a little bit about your bio, and you've had this amazing career in all sorts of different areas. But a lot of people, it's hard for them to take that jump. I guess that's one thing that we have to do with our kids is helping them have the courage to take those jumps, to take chances, to risk failing.
Absolutely. And I think the attitude toward failure and risk taking is probably the biggest difference between people who become entrepreneurs and people who don't.
Mm-hmm.
Entrepreneurs are raised not to be afraid to fail, not to be afraid to take risks. So you take a risk and it doesn't work. What did you learn from it? What are you going to do differently next time? It's how you learn and grow. Like, you shouldn't be afraid. You shouldn't be so careful and so cautious. And it's just sad to live your life like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. And I think things are changing. I know when I started this podcast back in 2017, that parents are still trying to bubble wrap their kids so that they didn't experience any kind of failure or loss or hurt feelings. And I hope parents are kind of getting over that now, but we're still, really overprotective of our kids. I was talking to a teacher today. It's like every moment of a child's life is scheduled.
It's awful. It's awful. And these kids, the parents are like the snowplow parents. They're doing everything for their kids. They're fixing everything. They're doing everything. They're making everything better. At some point, the kid's going to go out on their own. Mm-hmm. And then they're going to realize life isn't like that. And they're cruising for a bruising, Mm-hmm. It ain't going to be sweet.
Yeah. I have a cousin who is CEO of an engineering firm, and he was sharing with me just a couple of weeks ago that he has young people coming in, interviewing for his job, bringing their parents to the interview.
Oh, my God.
That's just, I was very supportive of all my kids, but I never went to any of their interviews.
Isn't that sad?
I think it really is. And I can't imagine somebody hiring somebody who brought their mommy to an interview.
No. But I talk about this a lot in the book, and about, and many experts or principals of schools and people with a lot of experience say that that's one of the biggest problems today, is that nobody wants their child to fail, and if you don't fail, you don't learn.
Yeah. I had after when my son was 6 or 7 years old, I encouraged him to play soccer, and so we signed him up for the local recreation league. And somebody told somebody when they saw me at the field that I had coached at a very competitive high school, and they said, "Come on, you got to coach, and you're going to add so much." And I said, I don't think I'd be a good fit here. And they convinced me, and I wasn't a good fit there. They didn't keep score. And, it didn't work out.
Did you sound like soccer?
No, he did. We did the same thing that you did with your son. My wife surprised me. First off, it surprised the heck out of me that my wife said, "Chris, do you want to play football?" And so that was the first shock, that my wife would actually suggest that my son go out and play tackle football. And the second shock was he said, "Yes." I said, okay. So we went down to sign up. And as I was writing the check, I said to him, I said, Chris, now I'm write this check. If once I hand it to him, you're committed for the season, like you did. You want to quit at the end of the season? That's fine. And he said, no, I want to do it. And I said, fine. I handed the check, and then we walked down the hall, and they started giving him his pads and his helmet. And he looked at me and he said, why do I need this? Tackle football, Chris. But I said, but it's too late. I already paid. So, and he actually had a good experience with it. He didn't have the passion that my daughter had for dance, but he did. He made some great lifelong friendships, and he had a lot of fun. And hopefully he doesn't have CTE.
Yeah. Well, that's my younger son played football.
Yeah. What was it that inspired you to write this book? I mean, like I alluded to, you had a very busy career.
So my older son, the tennis player, started an organization called Summit Series, which is conferences of young entrepreneurs. So I'd go to these different events starting about 14 years ago, and I didn't know a lot of young entrepreneurs back then, and I was just so curious how they had turned out the way they had. And I'd ask them, like, how did you end up like this? So willing to work so hard to turn your dream into a reality, to take on so much risk and work so single-mindedly toward this one purpose without any idea if it was going to pay off. And they all said, something like, I had someone who believed in me. Mm-hmm. And I was so struck by this, I just kept talking about it. And the kids said, you have to write a book. And I said, I'm not going to write a book. And they're like, no, you have to write a book. And I said, I can't write a book. And they said, you have to write a book. So they wore me down. And they wrote the preface, and they said, everyone needs someone to believe in them. And sometimes that's even your kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So important. So important. You had a very fascinating career. Can you talk a little? You worked 20 years in government. You were an FTC commissioner and staff director of the President's Council of Economic Advisors.
I bounced around a lot.
Yeah, you couldn't hold a job. I don't know.
And then I don't even have half of it in there. I spent the 90s setting up economic think tanks in Eastern Europe.
And
that's a big conversation stopper, I've discovered.
No, not with me, because, that was right at the time when those countries were shortly countries.
Right after the fall of communism. Yeah.
So you, in a lot of cases, you were talking to people who were kind of starting at zero.
Yes.
Raising a for-profit business.
Yes. Well, nonprofit, but usually, but anyhow. Yeah. So I had just been at the Council of Economic Advisor. A friend of mine had done the economic transition plan for Bulgaria. And he said, none of these countries have economic think tanks, have organizations set up outside the government to criticize the government because they've been under communism. And he said, if you can run the Council of Economic Advisors, you can set up an economic think tank. I think you should go do this. And I was like, okay. And I had no idea what I was doing. But anyhow, so I got grants from USAID, and I set up economic think tanks in all these countries: Albania, Bulgaria, Montenegro, Serbia, Croatia. And I was just talking to someone about it earlier. The thing that's so weird to me is when I was there was like, one Soviet era hotel, and now these places are just full of like resorts, and they're destinations for tourism. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I guess we succeeded. But anyhow,
it's wonderful watching people succeed when they're given the tools, and more importantly, given the opportunity to go out and create something.
No, it is. It is.
And I think more and more kids, as we're looking ahead to the future with AI and self-driving cars and all those other, changes that technology is bringing to us, I think it's going to be very, very important. Or as we say here in Boston, it's going to be wicked important for kids to be able to pivot and to take chances and to risk failing. All those all those traits that an entrepreneur needs.
Absolutely. You have to be resilient, and you have to look around the corner and figure out new ways to do things. And, I think parents, it's among the things parents should be pleased to teach their children.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know people are going to want to know where they can go to find out more about raising an entrepreneur, let children figure things out for themselves, and find out more about that, your career.
So the actual title of the book is Raising an Entrepreneur, How to Help Your Children Achieve Their Dreams, 99 Stories from Families Who Did. And they can find it on Amazon. I've done a hard copy book, a book for Kindle, and I've actually read it, so you can do Audible. It's 99 stories, each of which starts with 2 photos, one of them when they were young and one of them today, which I think makes it so approachable. It's 2 to 5 page stories, so I wouldn't read it to a 3-year-old, but I'd certainly read it to a kid in junior high and or high school. I think they'd be fascinated. It's easy to read and fun. I think families could enjoy, reading it and going through these stories, half men, half women, and, just a bunch of easy to read 2 to 5 page stories about fascinating people and their journey.
What a great thing, read a story at breakfast and then talk about the entrepreneur on the way to school.
Absolutely. How cool would that be?
That would be very cool. I love it. And as you noticed from my botching of your title at the beginning and end of the show, I am not afraid of making a mistake. I'm very comfortable, wallowing in my failure. So we've had a great time speaking to the author of Raising an Entrepreneur, and a big, beautiful subtitle. Our guest has been Margot Bisnow. Margot, thanks so much for being with us.
It was so fun, Jed. I'm so happy to have done it.
Hey, are you ready to ignite a passion for reading in your students? Introducing bookandauthor.com, your gateway to literacy connections. With bookandauthor.com, connecting your school with talented authors of captivating kids' books has never been easier. Simply visit our user-friendly website and explore our extensive database of authors. Filter your search based on budget, genre, and availability. Discover the perfect match for your school and your students. But that's not all. With bookandauthor.com, you have the power to request a proposal. Let vetted authors come to you with their tailored ideas, ensuring an unforgettable literacy experience for your students. Don't wait any longer to inspire young minds through the magic of books. Visit bookandauthor.com today and open the door to a world of literacy connections. Bookandauthor.com, where literacy comes to life. Joining us right now from the great state of Illinois, our guest is here today to celebrate her middle grade fairy tale fantasy. It's called Beyond Mulberry Glen. Please welcome to the show, Millie Florence. Hey, Millie, how are you?
I am good. I'm so excited to be here.
I love your energy. So I have a feeling that if you got that energy and it's included in the book, people are going to love your book. Tell us all about Beyond Mulberry Glen.
Yeah, absolutely. So Beyond Mulberry Glen, it is publishing January 7th, 2025. And it's the story of 11-year-old Lydia Green, who lives in the magical realm of the Valleylands with her mismatched family of fairies and philosophers. Until one day, that is, when she hears about a mysterious force known as the darkness that dwells within the forest Tenebrae. But not only does it dwell within the forest, lately it has begun to creep into Lydia's own mind. And the fun thing about this book is I originally self-published it when I was 15 years old, and in a very exciting turn of events, it got picked up by a publisher, Waxwing Books, which is run by Sarah Mackenzie, and it's now re-releasing with a new cover, and some additional edits and illustrations, and I'm so thrilled, that for everyone to get to read it.
You are listening to Millie. I get the chance to see her. She is just bursting with happiness and joy. She is radiant. And so I'm so excited for you. How much did you have to change from that original manuscript that you wrote when you were 15? You said, right?
Mm-hmm. 15, yeah. Not very much, actually. Nothing about the plot has changed. No, like, deleted or rewritten scenes. It was mostly, like, line edits. The book did get decently shorter, but that was just through the process of, like, you know, editing paragraphs to make them a bit more concise, right? Because I think the main thing that I have improved in as a writer over the years is I can communicate more with less. So what originally took me, 3 paragraphs to say, I can now say in 1. So it was very much line by line edits, but it's the same story.
That's wonderful. What an accomplishment being able, we've had a lot of young authors on, but none whose book that they wrote as a kid was picked up by a traditional publisher.
Yeah, it was really exciting. It's a fun story, actually. And Beyond Mulberry Glen was actually, I self-published another book before that. So the first book that I published was Honey Butter, and I actually published that when I was 13 years old. I self-published that. And ever since I published those 2 books, I was working really, really hard to promote them, to get the word out there about myself. So I went to a lot of conventions to sell my books. I would stand at the booth and talk to people and tell them about my books and sign them for people. And I got to meet readers, and it was super, super cool. And at one of these conventions, after, a long day standing at my booth all day, I got on the elevator with my dad and my sister to go get dinner, and it went down a few floors, and then the doors opened, and Sarah Mackenzie, the founder of Waxwing Books, stepped on. And we had like a 30-second conversation where I said, oh, I'm a big fan, because she has a podcast and I've been listening to it for ages. I'm a big fan of what you do. I'm an author and I have a booth here. And she's like, oh, that's so cool, whatever. It was like 30 seconds. That was it. And I remember stepping off the elevator and like walking down the hallway with my mouth just open, because I was like, that was a literal elevator pitch. I literally, anyway, but I kind of thought that would be it, because it's not like I even had much time, right, to talk to her in the elevator. So I thought, oh, later I'll reach out again and maybe she'll remember me. But then the next day I was at the convention again, talking to people, selling my books, and a mom came up to my table and she pointed at Honey Butter, my first book, and she says, "Can I buy this? Sarah Mackenzie just told me it was phenomenal." It turns out that Sarah had looked me up that night, bought the ebook of Honey Butter, read it that night, and was recommending it the next day to people at the convention because she was speaking at the convention.
Wow. What an amazing turn of events for you.
Yeah, seriously, like I write fiction books, so I'm accustomed to like coming up with surprising plot twists, but let me tell you, I don't think I could ever write something as thrilling as that.
Well, that's amazing. Congratulations. That's so exciting.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I'm so excited in so many ways, because it's really genuinely a dream come true for me, because I have been a fan of Sarah and her podcast and what she's done since I was like 10 or 11. So,
wow. Well, that's really wonderful. Let's talk a little bit more about Beyond Mulberry Glen. Did this idea come to you in a dream, or is it something that you're working on? I'm so interested in creators' processes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to really talk about the beginning of Beyond Mulberry Glen, I have to go back a little bit further, which was right after I published Honey Butter. I love to write fantasy. Fantasy is my main genre. Honey Butter was not fantasy. Honey Butter was a contemporary, so it took place in the real world. And I did that on purpose because I wanted my first book, even, at a very young age, I was very aware, like, I'm still a beginner. So I wanted the first book I published, I wanted to be very confident that it would be a good book. So I chose to write something really simple, really short, that took place in the real world, so that I could do a really good job at it, feel very confident about the quality. But once I finished that book, I'm like, okay, now it's time for the fantasy, because I love fantasy so much. So I knew for a fact already, as soon as I finished Honey Butter and published it, that that I wanted my next book to be a fantasy novel. And around this time, I was kind of, playing with a few different ideas. A lot of the ways that my stories come to me is kind of an initial, very whimsical image. I'll be outside walking or biking. My family, we have big, woods outside our house. I love nature. I love spending time in nature. That's a place I get a lot of my ideas. It's great to go out there and just brainstorm, right? And on one of my walks one day, I kind of had the idea of a girl who lives in a treehouse, and then she goes and has muffins for breakfast. And that was kind of like the opening whimsical image for Beyond Mulberry Glen was who you will discover is the main character, Lydia, and the first morning you see her going to have breakfast in her magical little world.
Very cool. Now, fantasy, I'm always amazed at how authors are able to create these worlds and magic and physics. How do you keep everything straight as you're creating this world and telling the story?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And to answer that, I think I should probably explain that in writing, we talk about world building and magic systems on a spectrum. So there is soft magic systems and hard magic systems. There's soft world building and there's hard world building. Hard world building is what you would think of like Lord of the Rings, with all the maps, all the places, right? A hard magic system is where it's almost like a science, right? You know all the rules for the magic system, exactly how it works. Soft magic systems are on the opposite end of the spectrum. So they're more like the magic within the book is less used to solve problems. Maybe the characters don't even use magic. It's more a part of the setting or the vibe, right? And it's a spectrum, so you'll have books in the middle as well, where there's some parts of the world building and the magic system that is very thought out, very on the page, and there are other parts that are a bit more whimsical, a bit more mysterious. Soft magic systems are great for more mysterious books, right? You leave a bit of that whimsy, a bit of that mystery, a bit of that sense of wonder in it, right? And Beyond Mulberry Glen is more on the side of the soft magic system. So within Beyond Mulberry Glen, the characters themselves don't actually use magic, but the world around them is magical. So there is one of my favorite places in the book is the libraries they go to, which are these magical libraries where it's kind of alive and the bookshelves shift and move like a maze and you can get lost in there. Now, I never explicitly say how this works, how this came to be, because I don't have to, right? Within a soft magic system, it's there more to be an obstacle for the main character. You don't have to understand how it works for them to navigate it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still a little bit in awe because at 13 and 15, you have this knowledge, and I'm guessing you're not that much older than you were when you wrote the book for the first time.
I'm 21 now.
Okay, I can't ask a woman their age.
No, I look really young. I'm well aware.
Where did you get this understanding of writing, and where'd you get the confidence? That's another thing. There are a lot of people who are, it's like, I want to be a writer, but I'm not that good, and I don't know. And here you are, 13, 15 years old, going, I'm going to write a book, and I just wrote a book, and hey, famous lady that I love, this is my book. You should check it out. And where does that come from?
Yeah, this is something I think my parents have also asked me. Where do you...
I was waiting for you to say, well, my parents, they always encourage me. But no, they're just as baffled as I am.
Well, no, they do always encourage me. Absolutely. Yes, they're very encouraging. But I know my mom especially is like, I could not do what you do. So she's more encouraged, like, you go do that. I will support you from over here, and I love her for it. But no, for me, it genuinely something I love to do. It wasn't necessarily that I was confident I had some great natural skill. In my mind, it was like, well, I can learn, you know. No one starts out being amazing at it. The reason that I know what I do about writing is because I loved it so much. I chose to go out and learn more about it. And, I checked out all the books from the library that I could find on writing fiction. And at age 11, I had a Pinterest board where I would save articles and blog posts and YouTube videos all about writing craft and creating good fiction, what makes a good book, you know. So it wasn't that I was necessarily confident in myself. I just knew that that's the way the world works. If you take the time to learn something, you'll eventually get good at it. It's not anything special to do with me, right? And I don't know. I think there's also a part of me, and I know not everyone is this way, but I don't fear rejection as much as I fear not trying. Like, for me, in that elevator with Sarah Mackenzie, if I had not spoken up in that moment, for the rest of my life, I would have thought, what if, you know, for the rest of, like, not trying makes me feel more like a failure than trying and then getting rejected does. And this is something I've realized about myself more recently because I get this question a lot and I'm like, I don't know. It feels obvious to me. If you love something, if you know it's what you love to do, why not go after it, right? The worst people can say is no. And no doesn't scare me because at least then I know I tried. I knew I did everything I could, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's really impressive. And I love that attitude because it's true. You know, if I was just speaking to one of my interns and she was asking me how this show grew to where it was. And in a large way, we took off because one day I got a text from my son who said, you should have LeVar Burton on your show. And I said, yeah, I should have $1 million in the bank too, but neither one of those things are going to happen. But I had an interview and then I thought, what the heck? What's the worst that can happen?
Exactly.
And I reached out. I found a contact. I reached out and I got a yes. So
yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful advice for anybody is to, follow your lead. I love that you have the awareness at this young age that not trying is worse than failing.
Yeah. Well, and failure is subjective as well, because what's going to happen if someone says no? You move on to the next person, right? Like,
exactly. Yeah. We should bottle this and sell it.
Yes. The world would be a better place, I think, if more people weren't afraid to pursue what they loved.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me, what is it about this middle grade audience that you enjoy writing for?
I love, there's just so much whimsy in it, I think. Like, one of the middle grade books I love is called, let me get the name right. The Rise and Fall of Mount Majestic by Jennifer Trafton. And the premise of that story is that there's this island with this mountain, and the palace is built atop the mountain, and the mountain rises and falls every day. And the main character discovers that the reason it does this is because it's actually the stomach of a sleeping giant, right? How cool is that? How imaginative and creative and whimsical is that? But would that ever fly in an adult book or a young adult book? No. When you're writing for kids of this age, there's just a greater suspension of disbelief. Kids are much better at suspending their disbelief, at being willing to embrace the imaginative, the impossible, the wonderful, right? And I love that. I love that I can write about libraries that shift and move, that trap characters inside. I love that I can write about, a fairy who lives in a peach tree, or that elves who know Latin, that sort of thing. And kids will just accept it and they'll roll with it, and they love how creative and wonderful all of that is. And those are my favorite types of stories to write, are the ones that have that element of just wacky, quirky creativity. And I think that's best suited towards middle graders, kids of that age.
It's interesting you say that, because as you and I were talking about Superman before, and the town of Metropolis, Illinois, which probably isn't too far away from where you are, but The idea that there's this guy who left the planet Krypton and crashed to Earth and was raised by parents and can run into a phone booth and change and
Yeah.
become a hero and save the world. That's pretty out there. You got to suspend a lot of disbelief to kind of get into that. But audiences, especially adult audiences, they're spending a lot of time in that superhero world. Do you think maybe we as adults can mature enough so that not only can we suspend our disbelief to watch people beat each other up, but to be part of a whimsical, fun kind of magical place?
Absolutely. I mean, there's the quote by C.S. Lewis, "Someday you will be old enough to read fairy tales again." That's one of my favorite writing quotes.
Awesome. I love that. Well, I think I am officially old enough to read fairy tales again.
Good for you. Yeah. No, because I think you are right. Like, it does take a certain amount of maturity and maybe even humility, I think, to be able to embrace that childish side again, to be able to embrace that inner beautiful creativity. Another quote I love is by Pablo Picasso, and it is, "Every child is an artist. The trouble is how to remain an artist as you grow up." And I think we're all born with that creativity, that sense of whimsy and wonder. And I think as you grow up, you can kind of start to lose that if you're not careful, if you focus more on, the logic and how things ought to be, right? Rather than embracing and continuing to nurture that sense of creativity and wonder.
What kind of things are you actively doing to make sure you don't grow up?
Well, honestly, I think a big part of it for me is spending time with kids. I love, I do some part-time childcare and babysitting, and I read aloud to my little sister who is 10 years old, and kids just continue to amaze me, just with their imagination. One of the kids I was watching, it was like a whole group of kids at one point, and there's the littlest girl who was 3 or 4 years old. We were outside, and she found a button in the grass, and she was so excited about it. And she decided to go and to each one of the other kids individually and be like, "Look, it's a button." And I don't know, I think that's so beautiful, just finding the most simple things and seeing them as amazing, seeing them as magical, right? So I think allowing yourself to be inspired by children and their wonder is a big part of it. I also think, intentionally taking the time to notice the world around you, right? Notice the buttons. Go outside and look at the trees and, just take pictures of things you think are beautiful and, keep a list of your favorite words. There's so many little creative things, I think, if you just keep an open mind, I guess.
Yeah. I love that. Have you had the chance to do any school visits?
I have. I love school visits. And that's another part of being inspired by kids and why I love being a middle grade author so much, because that job does allow me to go see kids at schools and libraries and conventions and homeschool co-ops. And it's always amazing to, hear how excited they are about my books. And they often inspire me, whenever I go to an event like that, I always hear from the teachers and the kids, "Oh, you're so inspiring to us," whatever. I'm like, "You guys are inspiring to me." I get to come in here and hear how you guys interpret the story. I had one girl walk up to me at a convention and hand me fan art of one of my books, which was a super cool experience. I love fan art and seeing how different readers interpret the characters. I had another girl, she gave me a bracelet she made that was all yellow because I love the color yellow, and she gave that to me at a convention. That was also super cool. I don't know. Yeah, kids inspire me. And I also teach writing classes for kids. That's one of the things I do. I teach writing workshops. And that is also very special because, again, I get to see that childlike creativity in action in the stories that they tell, and they'll read aloud for me to give feedback on or whatever. So yeah, that's a big part of it. Doing those writing workshops with kids as well. It keeps me warmed up as a writer, right? You know, how athletes will do exercises, like physical exercises to keep their muscles in shape. As writers, I'm a big advocate of doing mental exercises, creative exercises, and teaching those writing workshops kind of builds into my life, keeps me accountable to keep doing those creative exercises. So yeah, I absolutely love that part of the job. It's one of my favorite parts.
Well, that's really wonderful. I could tell that you would have a good school show because you have that energy and that smile and
thank you.
That I know kids will respond to. We should tell everybody where they can go to find out more about you and find out more about Beyond Mulberry Glen.
Absolutely. So I would recommend everyone to go to my website, which is millieflorence.com. And you can go there to learn all about me and all about my book. So there are links there to all my books and where you can buy them. Specifically, Beyond Mulberry Glen, it is available for pre-order right now until it comes out January 7th. And if you pre-order it, you get stickers and bookmarks for free, which is very, very exciting. And a signed book plate from me. Those will be arriving in the mail soon. I get to sign all of them. I'm so excited about that. So everyone who pre-orders it gets a signed book plate and a bookmark and stickers. I'm most excited about the stickers, personally. Anyway, but yeah, go to my website, millieflorence.com. You can also, if you are interested in having me speak or teach a workshop, you can find information about that there as well. So yeah.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Beyond Mulberry Glen. It is a brand new middle grade fairy tale fantasy from our guest, Millie Florence. Millie, I have a feeling you are going to be back on Reading with Your Kids in the not too distant future with a new adventure to tell us about.
I would absolutely love that.
Thanks so much for being on the show.
Bye. Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we'll start by thanking our guest, Margot Bisnow. Please be sure to check out Raising an Entrepreneur. And also Millie Florence. Be sure to check out Beyond Mulberry Glen. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady, Rayling Tang. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.